Live.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next sections of Kotlin discussion today, and welcome everyone to join up. Okay, so let's just quickly introduce a bit about ourselves so that everyone who are watching our live streaming today can have a clue like who we are doing and what is some background that people are joining this discussion today. First of all, let's give the room to the only woman in the live stream today for the discussion. Hey, can you give some introduction about yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. So my name is Thủy. You can call me Yo-Yo, and I am Android engineer. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Thủy. Thank you for joining us today. And Phát, can you give some introduction about yourself?
Hey everyone. So my name is Phát, working at Lazada. Me and Enrique working together, and we are based on Vietnam and building an awesome app for a logistic app. So thanks everyone, and also the host for inviting me to join this and discuss about the Kotlin Multiplatform. So yeah.
And Enric, hello Enric, hello
Yes.
again.
Hello, Tuan. We see virtually more than in person each other lately. Yeah, my name is Enrique, but you can call me Enric. I'm working together with Fat at Lazada, and before we Tuan, my role is to make bugs that Fat have to fix later. And I'm a Kotlin and Android Google developer expert, and I love Kotlin and Kotlin Multiplatform as well.
Thank you, Enric. Thank you. Okay, and glad to have you on all of you guys joining the live stream today. I'm really nervous because it has been like 2 months or more for me to go in live like this. Hello again, everyone. My name is Tong. I'm an Android developer before. I'm a Google developer expert in Kotlin, which is my technically something of my hobby. Right now, I'm working on a secret startup that is to help move the whole digital transformation for Vietnam economy. So right now, let us start the discussion and our favorite topic on Kotlin, which is Kotlin Multiplatform for mobile. And to begin with today, let's have Enric to give us some brief introduction on what are you calling multiple platform for mobile, especially for mobile, and how can these things can help us in our daily work, especially for mobile developers. So Enric, please take your stage.
Yeah, let me, I think I can share some. So just for context, I was talking recently in a meetup in Munich about Kotlin Multiplatform and how Kotlin Multiplatform, so my argument is that it's mostly problematic for Swift developers. As Android developers, we have already a bunch of, let me change the screens. You can see that, yeah. As Android developers, we're already familiar with Kotlin, we're familiar with the tooling, we are familiar with its features, but we Swift developers are not familiar with the language, are not familiar with the tooling, are not familiar with the features, despite Swift being fairly similar to Kotlin. And I think that's the main block to its adoption in the both platforms. So yeah, I expect that you have fun in this session today with us. So the motivation to change generally or to use one multi-platform framework is to decrease the cost. I think this is a ground argument, and we should focus on increasing quality because we can going down with the cost is never a path that we would like to follow. It also allows us to have some interesting things, such as sharing code within the company and working on feature teams instead of having to organize the team by platforms. Let's say we have a team working on Android native, another one on iOS, another one on web. We could have the teams specializing in the domain. For instance, the login team, the payment team, and that's more efficient in the long term for a company. And we have one tech stack instead of fragmenting through several of them, are dual the hiring, maintenance, etc. Before, in the past, we had some trials like Xamarin, React Native. This is how we can classify the multi-platform development, either proprietary. So we have Xcode for iOS, we have Java or Kotlin for Android. And then we have hybrid HTML and JavaScript frameworks. You might remember PhoneGap or Cordova, as well as cross-platform native frameworks. Kotlin is a modern language. So if you've been doing Android development, you know that we cannot jump into the latest version of Java because until recently, Oracle was trying to demand Google for using some features of the language. Luckily, one court in the United States have favored Google on their decision, and Google has been doing the right thing by interoperating with the Java API. And Oracle essentially now is a company that buys other companies in order to use their copyrights and patents and demand them. In fact, somebody went to the Wikipedia and changed the entry of the largest law firms by revenue and put Oracle at the top. Since they essentially have now more lawyers than developers or technicians. Kotlin, as you know, it can interoperate. Well, I think maybe we can skip a little bit over the Kotlin part since we know what is Kotlin and what it's doing. So with Kotlin Multiplatform, the idea is that we will play with some expect actual keywords that allows us to define some modules in each platform, so in the GVM, in the particular architecture, and do the concrete implementation. So let's see just one example. So what we all do, what we're learning a language, we try to log and create our logger library and upload it into GitHub. So there is one more logging library in the world. And this is how it would work with Kotlin native. We would have written in Kotlin, obviously, a function to write log messages with this expect. That means that we expect the signature to be like this. And then depending on the log level, we might print them. So if it's debug or warning or error with a different color or whatever. So this would be the actual implementation on the GVM, internal actual fun. We use the print line function to print. In JS, we would use the console object in order to print, so console that has access to log and get framework from the screen, etc. And yeah, this is essentially, we will have our common modules that writes the expected definition, and Android or iOS import either GVM or Kotlin native libraries or iOS native libraries and can do the implementation. Another example is having the UUID. Here we see that in iOS, we would be using NSUUID, that's the native library from iOS. And in Android, we will use the Java UUID implementation. We have a bunch of libraries that have been already developed with support for Kotlin Native, Ktor, coroutines, the asynchronous solution from JetBrains, Kotlin X input-output, which is still experimental, Atomic FVM. There are a few considerations, however, that we need to know when we develop with Kotlin Multiplatform. And I think maybe we can take this discussion together. So, yeah, a few things is that this is still quite beta-ish, so there are a few things that are a little bit different from what you've been doing in the standard Kotlin. Things like an object belongs to one single thread, and if you want to share that object in different threads, you need to freeze it. I've been thinking, like, what does it mean to freeze an object? Does this exist in any other programming language? So the conclusion I reached is that everything you have written until now is not frozen. That's totally new, or I don't know if there is any other language that supports this concept, and essentially makes sort of a super immutable object. So the object itself is immutable, but also all the references. If you're using Kotlin and you have an immutable list, it's interesting because the list itself, it might be immutable, but the items that contains are not immutable, so you can keep changing them. Freezing the object makes everything absolutely immutable. Yeah, so some other things we need to consider. If we see this view model here written in Kotlin, contains like a username, password, whatever we need for a login view model. When we compile this in Swift, it didn't have support for generics. It didn't know what password was. Was this value any? Was this of type string? Now it got fixed last year, I think, by Kevin Galligan, the organizer of the DroidCon New York and CEO of Touch Lab in New York. But this is the kind of things that normally you hit when you're working with Kotlin Native. There is no support for multi-threaded coroutines on Kotlin Native, which might be an issue. Enums are not exhaustive. When you're working with enums in Kotlin, if you don't have the exhaustive iteration, you will get a warning from your IntelliJ Android Studio or IntelliJ saying that you need to make it exhaustive. And since enums in Swift do not support the exhaustive iteration, then we cannot have them as well on Kotlin Native, and that can potentially be a problem. There is no support for default arguments either when we are working with Kotlin Multiplatform on Swift. And this can be, of course, problematic. Imagine having a class with, I don't know, let's say 10 parameters coming in. First thing is that you're probably having too many parameters on the class, but if you absolutely need it, you will need to write them one by one because default are not supported. And so this could be the example of having an enum class with 4 different types. Here, see that we have this in Kotlin, we have this, let's take a look at here. We have the log level, 4 different items inside this enum, and we will have a function log that receives the default value of this enumeration as the log level. But here in Swift, it would not work. We still need to specify the, if we want the type of enum we have, it's not supported. There is no support for codable. The codable interface in Swift is similar to the serializable in Java. It's not just supported. That means that you need to serialize your items manually, which can be as well problematic. So yeah, I think iOS devs are a bit out of or they don't have the same support as Android developers have. I still think the technology has a lot of potential, since we really can write. I think the idea with Kotlin Native is to not write UX, is focusing on the fundamentals under an app. So Swift or iOS apps and Android apps and web apps, they might have different interfaces, but underneath, they're very similar. They make requests, they bring JSON objects from an endpoint, and they do things with them and store them on a database. And Kotlin Multiplatform is trying to fill this space. The things that are happening under the UX, and that should be the same for most platforms. What is your experience, folks? Have you used with Kotlin? Have you worked with Kotlin Multiplatform in the past? Let me stop sharing my screen. So.
All right, thank you, Enric. And okay, thank you, Enric. So, so let's say that is the questions for us to start the discussion. So, technically, for productions, I have never like Kotlin came into real, into real production application. So it were like on stopping at the playing around some kind of hobby application, and that was it. I think that were the I don't know, like the chance right now. We will talk more about the opportunity and the approach that we want to offer in this kind of capability into our production app later on. But right now, for me, it's just like on stopping at the like hobby application rather than production application.
Yeah.
Okay. How about you guys? Like, Phát, what are your experience?
I share the same feeling that I have no idea how does it look like for the production build, but I have the iterative use case for that in my I have no idea how does it look like for the production build, but I have it's like some echo here, right? Okay, but in the case of my previous companies, like we have like a share of the business logics, which is a very complicated. That is some sort of calculation, and it costs a lot of resource to make it to be visible, to be using on Android and iOS. And every time people want to charge for that, and then people would say like, no, I will never touch for that modem because it already worked. Why need to modify for that one, right? Mm-hmm. So the use case is that for the Android and iOS app, we don't support for for the online, but we do support for the offline mode, which is the calculation, the operation will be happen locally, right? So there will be certain sort of logic could be sharing at a common source and can be used for both Android and iOS. So every time we want to maintain, we want to modify that thing, and then we can basically just modify on the centralized place. We don't have to touch to the native code on Android and iOS. That would be the use case for that. And that would, and at the same time, if you want to have something like you want to modify for the platform specific that is consuming on that shared logic, you can actually touch on the Android and also iOS code to make that work for you. So I think that the case is here that it could reduce a lot of time for the maintaining and using when sharing for the same business logic, but you can benefit from having the native implementation on the target platforms. So I think that would be one use case for that.
Yes, for me, so I have not used the Kotlin multiple platform in the real project, but I have experience on using like share the code between iOS and Android by using the C and C++. And I also have experience on using the Spring that share like 70% of code with business logic of between the Android, iOS, and Windows desktop app and macOS app. And I think it's like, and I see that when I read the document of the Kotlin multiple platform, I think I think of the Spring. It will help us to share a lot of common business rules and save us a lot of time to write code and write a test. And yeah, so the for the prepared project and my current project, we use C and C++ to share the code between the iOS and Android. And I see that we need the engineer that have experience on C and C++ to implement that. And I think it's not kind of easy to maintain the C++. And yeah, so when I see the Kotlin platform, I say it's a very potential technology that for us in the future to replace the C++ to share the code between the iOS and Android, but still have the good performance of the native code of the Android iOS that we usually see when develop the mobile application. Yeah, that's my sharing.
Yeah. Coincidentally, me and Thủy, we used to work together on a project like 2 or 3 years ago, and that was a very large code base where we have the Android application and the iOS application that do share some of the code base together using C and C++ as a mechanism. So C and C++ we are using it to build into some kind of like native linking object, and then we use that embedded into our Android and to our iOS application. So it can help us do some kind of like multi-threading and some kind of like low-level network communication things. But that was something that really give us a hint on the demand. I mean, like the need and the like people really love to somehow to have some share responsibility, some share of code base between these two platforms, because like it was like some kind of common practice. It was some kind of like common earth for all of us to like be able to reuse some part of the application somewhere. And to reduce the total effort to develop some specific feature. And in the case of like FactSet, like if we have like some common logic, right, and it was like a perfect candidate for us to like start using KMM and KMP in our context. Not only, I mean, like I have seen one of the sharing before. I believe like 2 months ago we have a section about like Kotlin and Android in a company in Ho Chi Minh City, and then some of the developer there, they say they are very precious like experience. They are using KMM in terms of like mobile code platform sharing. So they have the use case where all the business logic are implemented in KMM and then get it interpreted into Android native code and into iOS embedded code so that they can use the logic together. And that was really the first time I really saw something with KMM can be to be released, being used in production application. And that was amazing. Like it, I mean, like it's something like still in beta, right? And then somebody else out there they really adopt it into a real application. That's a multi-million user. So that was totally mind blowing to me, and I believe that was the huge features for us to be able to consider using in our current production application. So moving forward with that, let's say we all know that there's always like two sides of a problem, right? Pro and cons to some certain usage for us, and especially in this kind of context. So let's say let's circle where should be the, I mean, like the right place for us to have a KMM to be implemented. So it should be, we have a multiple layer of a certain application, right? We have network layer, we have a logic and business layer, we have a database data storage layer, we have UI layer. So let's give us some kind of hint on what is the very good candidate for the KMM to be applied in these kind of layer. So let's start it with Enric. Enric, can you give some sharing on your experience playing around KML? So what would be recommended?
Yes, so before coming here to Vietnam, I was contracting at a few companies in Germany, and one of them was the public energy company of Munich. And one of the problems we were facing, which face, I guess, any other company in this world, is that essentially in iOS and Android, another problem that we solve or partially solve with KMP, it's the fact that that models are the same in both platforms, right? Let's say we're dealing with offers or events or whatever. And something that was happening from time to time is that, well, the developer in iOS updates something, or in Android, and the other app is crashing, not working, or there is like some disconnection between the both systems. And we actually use Kotlin Multiplatform to generate the well, things like DAOs or like a request or response objects. They were unified in a central code base. So every time we were doing changes to the model, they automatically built on the CI and deployed to the Maven, internal Maven repository or the internal Cartal repository from Swift. And the apps automatically had access to that. That was a very nice use case because by making those models technology independent and only writing them in Kotlin, it was really nice that we were keeping both apps updated during the entire life cycle. Another example that we started implementing, I'm not really sure how is the status right now, but I maybe should ping some of my former colleagues. It was for small modules, things like imagine something like a deprecation feature. A deprecation feature in an app essentially connects at the beginning of the app startup and checks if, hello, I'm the app for iOS, the version 3.1.0. Should I deprecate myself? Am I allowed to start? I think it's one of those things that is very useful in any app because you can deactivate apps if for any reason need to be updated or force update, etc. This is something that is essentially making a request to an endpoint, taking some data and saving the data on a database or share preferences or whatever. So we started doing that with Kotlin Multiplatform with the idea of this is a very independent module. We can just download the library in iOS and call the is deprecated function from the beginning. The app can with Kotlin Multiplatform we can save on database with for example DB or SQL liter from TouchLab, and we can make network requests with Ktor. I think it makes sense to apply in all those in this at least to get a start and see how the technology evolves. Those risks are very controlled. if for any reason, let's say we don't want to keep working with KMP starting tomorrow or next month, it's very easy to remove it from the app, or it can stay there without the need of migrating it, because it's just a small microservice or micro functionality inside the app. And this avoid the risk of, especially in big corporations, you just cannot introduce new technology and not considering the possible risk. Otherwise, we will be doing Compose, all of us now that is beta, but generally we need to be a bit more careful. And it's one of my concerns also when using KMP, that it's not quite stable yet. JetBrains is having the initiative, but neither Google nor Apple have any clear opinion on this, and they need to support this effort in order to get it more standardized. I think you're mute, Tan.
Okay, thank you for your sharing, Enric. I do believe that there's one way, I don't know, like a secret one from everybody in this programming field, is that I would like to have one code base that is written once, but then run everywhere. And that will, like, I don't know, that will admit that everybody is pursuing right now. We do want to have somehow to simplify, to reduce the workforce, but rather we want to increase our productivity. And that is like coming to the tooling people. They provide the tool that is somehow to help us or leverage the kind of like one run everywhere philosophies. And KMM and KMB were obviously one of the very good demonstration for the philosophy in programming. And what about you, Fak? What are your talk on this kind of topic? Where should you think that should be like the perfect use case for KMM, KMB in this scenario?
Yes, depends on the business requirement as well. But I think the most intuitive place that, again, that is some sort of when we want to convert like some kind of calculation, a sort of logics that we want to share. Like in the case of Lazada, like we are building the app that have multiple modules, right? So we are having something like core that contains like everything that all the module should be depend on. And the core contains many things that you already mentioned, like the database, the network layers, and many things. But again, I think for the general case, for only use case that would have like one source that many modules depend on, and people can only modify on that module, and then everyone can get the benefits on get the latest version of that. I think that would be the good use case for it. For example, let's say in the case we have something like the payment gateway that is support for the multiple provider. So we care about the result, we care about the input, but we don't really care about the detailed implementation. So let's say in the beginning we have only one client using for that. That should be okay. But later on, then we have 2 or more, or 10 or 20 clients that come into, and then there will be a different in terms of implementation, in terms of the approach taken for that. That could be using for the callback, that could be using for the interval calling or something. And then we need to considering for how we can structure, how we can centralize everything in one module. And that would be something that KMN should be support for that case, when you have some like a sort of centralized sort of logic to be stored in one module. And then what for the consumer, like the client, they just care about, okay, this is the input, this is the output. I just put the right one, and then I can get a result for that. So I think that would be the very good use case for it. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Fak. Yeah, I do share with more your talk on this, especially when in the case we are having with the business layer. So business layer is kind of like a very neutral and very like, I don't know, like proper layer that we do want to be able to share between multiple platforms, not just on the mobile. So I'm not saying it's just like something on Android and iOS, but rather than we can think about some kind of like cross-platform sharing. It's just if you have your backend that run on JVM that is written in Kotlin or Java, then it could be another use case that you can share some kind of like logic that could be shared like cross from domain client to the server client to the server area as well. How about you, Thủy? What do you think on this topic? Like, what is the proper layer? What is the not proper layer on your top that is KMM and KMP should be applied?
Yeah, so for me, you can see it in for now in now. So you can see in many, almost the mobile app, you have like send requests to back to the backend and get the data and data and render on the UI, or get the data and save it to database. So actually, it can be shared between the Android and iOS, and but it still keep the same performance because the KMM built to compile to the Java bytecode, and for the Android and for the for the iOS built to the binary code file. So it still keep the same performance, but we can save the time to implement the network request or the request to the database for Android and then the iOS separately, then write a test for each platform. So it would take the time, and it was the money, right? So for me, I think, and also if we also can share some behavior of the app in the common module to, if we use it like MVB or something like that, so we can create the interface in the common module, and in each platform we implement this by using specific the native code. Yeah, so we can integrate the second in the common module by using the KMN. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for your sharing, Thầy. And I think we do have some question and comment coming from our audience crossing the platform. So I'm going to pick one question that we are having first here. Let me show it. Okay. So this is actually something that I'm expecting when we talk about this topic before. So when we have talking about like sharing code base, talking about reusing code and things like that, Flutter were one of my major popping up in my head. So let's come up with a very quick question regarding how can we compare like Kotlin multiple platform, especially for mobile, with Flutter. That is the rationale here that Flutter is very popular this year. Actually, not this year. I mean, like it gained the traction since like 2 years ago when Flutter coming out before beta version. So, Eric, I'm giving you the first chance on debate here.
Yes. Let me actually. I wanted to show something interesting. Let me see if I can find my tweet about it. Yeah, I think Flutter. It's. Let me share my screen. I found it.
Don't talk bad about Flutter here, Enric. You have a lot of audience who are favor on Flutter.
Yeah, so I think what I think is that I'm not an expert in Flutter, but I think Flutter is focusing more on fixing the UI thing. So we're using widgets. Those widgets get rendered on its platform. And Flutter is good at that. Kotlin, that's not the space of Kotlin Multiplatform. Kotlin Multiplatform is focusing on everything underneath. And in fact, there was a guy that was using Kotlin Multiplatform Flutter. I think it was one guy from Philippines living in Berlin, and Kotlin Flutter Lorenzo, that he wrote an app with GB Lorenzo, this guy from here, fast prototypes with Flutter and Kotlin native. He was actually combining both, Flutter to make the UI, Kotlin native to make everything underneath. But then I think that's probably defeats the a little bit the purpose, because we're already using them two technologies, different code base. Anyway, what I wanted to share is that there was this comment by Jake Wharton. You might know him from any of the libraries that you're using. He probably wrote them. And he was in the Reddit of Android Dev. Somebody asked, why is Android pushing Flutter and Kotlin at the same time? Seems like a problem on the high-level strategy from Google. And this guy was working at Google, and he said that what you can read here. So the team at Google is recommending either to use Java or Kotlin or C++. That's what they recommend. Flutter is an external team at Google. They have nothing to do with Android. They try to push the product, but nobody at the Android team itself recommends Flutter to develop as an official way to develop Android apps. So I personally, if you ask me, I think those frameworks make sense. So if you are developing, let's say you're a startup, you want to develop a prototype, you want to get the prototype running cheap so you can get more financiation going into the Series A, B, whatever. There is a space for that. It's not that there is one solution that applies to all the problems when we're working with apps and developing software. But it seems that if we're thinking about effectively developing apps for Android, it seems that Flutter might not be the framework we're dreaming with, since it's not officially recommended. And I actually have, if I can find it, another slide. Yeah, so let me move it here. This is my experience also with Kotlin, with multi-platform framework. So when we start doing the Hello World, and in Flutter we can make this sample app where we click and there is some counter increasing, it's everything very easy, it makes sense. But then when you're working on real projects and you have to integrate several APIs, then you have to use a map and accessing location. Using the hardware intensively, the project of complexity of the project starts growing. You need to integrate with different systems. Then the cross-platform framework starts not really scaling so well. And it's one of the risks when you're developing software at big scale. You need to keep this into consideration. You just can't start using something because it's cool, because you like it, because things seem easy. You need to know that this framework approach or this software approach has a valid track record. It can be used for a project in the long term, is sustainable and scalable. And I think on that aspect, not all the cross-platform frameworks perform so well. I don't know about Flutter. I don't have a practical big experience with it, but it might be the case.
Thank you for sharing your thought on this. What do you think about this, Thủy? Flutter and Kotlin, KMM and KMB. What are your preference? And like, if you have a choice, to start everything from scratch, would you prefer like Flutter, or you start a project with native code and then you have a KMB and KMM to be able to share your code base?
Yes. So I think it depends on the project. So if your project is just get the data from backend and you have a UI, and it is like, I think it's simple, and I think it is good if we use Flutter to relate the product fast. Mm-hmm. But the problem is if there is performance issue on the UI rendering with Flutter, if you can use it on the variable of Flutter, you can see a lot of issue of the list view when you scroll to the last. So if you like lucky some, so we should consider like the slide that Eric sharing before. So you can see that if the project is more complicated, like you want to connect to some device or some module, so we should, I think in this case, we should use the native app, but we can share KMM to share the code between the platform. So yeah. So I think the choice is depend on the project, depend on requirement. So if we make the wrong decision here, we will waste time. I hear some story from the candidate that I interviewed at the company, and in that company they use the Flutter, but that app required to access to the hardware of the Android phone. So the performance, they have the performance issue, and they decide to go back to the native app, and they don't want to use the Flutter anymore. So I think it depends on the project. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, thank you for sharing, and especially with your story with like people who already like experience this kind of like production experience. I mean, like they hit the wall at some time, and that story were really like precious for us to be learned. There's no time to make every single mistake. We can learn from other mistake, right? So, fact, how about your thought on this? Would you prefer Flutter?
If I have to choose, personally, I would choose Flutter. Sorry, guys.
Amazing.
Okay.
Amazing.
Okay, so few things that need to be taken into the consideration, right? So first thing would be a learning curve. So for me, for the Android developers, the learning curve will be a little bit faster because Kotlin is now the first citizen for Kotlin. So the KMP would be the better choice for that one because Kotlin will be using for the whole project in KMP. The second thing would be, I mean, this one a different tool for different use cases. So let's say if you want to build a whole project with the whole UI, and then go with Flutter. If you want to have like building the native UI UX, and then go with Kotlin, with some share of the business logic will be written in Kotlin. And additionally, there will one thing that you need to consider for this because KMN is quite handy and quite hard to integrate and bootstrap. In the case of Flutter, you just getting the latest one, and then you can get everything to be running on Xcode or Android Studio. Everything would be easy for you. But in the case of the KMP, you will need to take a lot of consideration in terms of the target device that you want to focus on. You will need to define the hierarchy. What would be the where you should storing for the command for that. That would be a little bit detailed, but again, in terms of the integration and the bootstrapping for new application, I think Flutter will have the better choice for this one. So.
Okay.
but I have to choose. I would choose Flutter. Flutter is 10 for me. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Park. Thank you, Park. I think that Park had some things make sense here. I mean, like from the transition point, like when we're talking about something new, people are really scared of changing, right? But if you have a very like easy way to change to like like transit from something to something else, that would be like more than better for people to welcome the new change for you to be adopted. And the fact that Flutter had a very like I don't know like practical way to access the UI problem, and also they have a very similar syntax. If you are like a code like you are a programmer based on Java or C++, then that is something look pretty similar, right? Familiar with you guys. So I do share with your fact on this point. I would go with Flutter in this case.
Sorry, Enric.
Okay. Okay. So moving on. We have a couple more questions that we would like to address. So next question is that how willing the iOS guy to deal with KMM in applying KMM for sharing module? They will lose the benefit of script language, and they stand no longer to have a chance to deal with important bit logic. So I would say from my personal experience, there's no iOS guy or mobile or Android guy or I don't know like there's no like platform guy here. We are talking about a product, and when we're working in a team, that is super important for me to have people that can cover for each other. So if I can have some common point between these people, like I don't care if you are a Swift guy, I don't care if you are a Kotlin guy, I don't care if you are a Flutter guy. If you can share, if you can cover the workload from the other people, that is more than welcome. We don't have to stick to something that is like I mean like comfortable for us forever, but rather than we should aim for something rather than is having benefit for all of us as a team. For me, that was purely my personal observation and experience that were like something that do help us on moving forward fast and success together. So, Thủy, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, like right now you are having working with a very large team, right? I know you were working with a very large team that cross country, cross continent, working on multiple modules of the very large application, and you are having interaction with both Android and iOS guys. So, what do you think about that? If you have a choice that people can share the workload together, would that be great for you?
Yeah, I think so. The KMM is more flexible than another cross platform, right? So we share the common logic, and so if we see that the KMM is not work well on the component, like you see it, the performance issue or anything like that, so you can make it to native code, and
Mm-hmm.
in the common module you just share the interface for
Mm-hmm.
both Android and iOS. So you still keep the the, uh, the benefits of the Swift language if you want. So
Mm-hmm. So that will come in with something we call the flexibility of choice, right? You can keep whatever you think that is better to be sold at the native code. Native here, I mean like iOS with Swift or Android with Kotlin, right? So
yeah,
if you want these components still be able to run and to be processed on the native platform level, then you have a freedom to do that. It's a matter of like of your choice to bring whatever components to the share module rather than we are forced to do those things. So I think
yeah,
that is something important for us to be able to determine before we adopt a certain technology. We have freedom to switch back and forth. Let's moving on with the next question. We actually have a lot of questions. So if you guys are having some time right now, you can come to the chat panel and reply these questions with your personal preference. And I would go one by one in the meantime. So the next question is coming from Trinh Lê. So the question is, correct me if I'm wrong, that the share code base between Android and iOS will combine to package into appropriate target file depending on the platform. Is that possible to debug the share code with the application code at the same time? If not, do you have any suggestion on making debugging share code when running application easier? Yeah, I can try to take the question with my personal experience on this. So if you are running in the debug mode, John, if you're running in the debug mode, you are absolutely can put the breakpoint in your calling code in the share module, and that your breakpoint will be guaranteed to be hit there. So that is in debug mode. But if you do want to debug in the compile mode, which is in production, then I don't know. There's a famous saying that if you debug in if you have a one line of debugging in production, you are killing a kitty. So I would say, but it is possible for you to try to debug with some kind of very simple printing command. That would technically what is debugging technique is about. Try to print out the value. But absolutely, you can put the breakpoint in the KMM code in the Kotlin share code base, and it will guarantee to be hit when you are running the debug in the console. Hope that helped. I can share with you the link later on. So the next question is, where is Xamarin? Hey, I know you have some time working in Xamarin, right? Can you share your experience on this point?
yeah. I think sharing is good, and we can share a lot of code between platform. If you are familiar with the C# and you love Microsoft, so sharing is good for you. But here we sponsored by Google developers, so we here discuss about KMM.
that is true. But you know, like fact, you used to work with C#, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Fact.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Eric, you have a chance to work with C# language.
In another life, yeah.
Myself is I'm a huge fan of C# language. It's a very clean and smart and very like very well organized language to me. It's very well organized and very well structured in terms of language. You are working with a very large team. C# is definitely a very good tool for people to be able to like working in opinionated way. So we don't have like freestyle coding here. So in a sense, I really love C#. But I have never tried Xamarin before. So that's true. That is one of the very good candidates for us to be able to share the code base between multiple platforms. So we will talk about that in maybe in like a different discussion, like comparing on the cross-platform development technique, maybe. So I'm coming to the next question is that from Thật Châu. Hello, Thật. Long time no see. So should KMM be considered stable soon since this stable level is still in alpha? And I do see the response to that question from Enric. So KMM can be itself in alpha and some of component in beta, and that not change anytime soon. So it needs to be evaluated carefully before you are consider using it, especially in your production application. And okay, I'm taking the next question. We have a lot of questions left. And from Yang Trang Đại Yang. Hello, old friend. So I would have this question to be answered by Fact.
What's up?
You have taken this question?
Hello. Can you share the roadmap of the full stack Kotlin developers? Wow. So this
consider
is
yourself.
Yeah. So this is a non-topic question that would be a very open question, right? So probably you can try it with the first season of the Android development first to be developing for the Android, which is using hardly for the Kotlin now, and then you can take a look at the older tutorial and aspect from the Kotlin homepage. There are a lot of material that you can take a look on. For example, the language features, which is great. The update version, the current version right now is 1.5.0, which is support a lot in terms of the platform interoperabilities, which is support for Java and other platform. You can take a look on that, and you can also take a look on these collection and orders useful features. It also support for the many things like multi-platform, support for the backend. We also had a backend, the Ktor, and many library using for that. So in general, I don't think I can give you a very specific answer for this, but probably you can try all the things that I mentioned about language features, library, and all the things I mentioned on the homepage, and then you have the full stack for the Kotlin developers.
Thank you, Fact. Enric, you want to have some add-on on the this question?
Can you share the roadmap to be full stack Kotlin developer? Well, full stack means doing Android apps. It means doing backend development, at least with Kotlin, and probably iOS apps. Well, I'm not sure.
Maybe on client side as well. We do have a Kotlin for JavaScript as well, right? So
correct,
maybe
we have Kotlin, yeah, so it can render into the for front end apps and create JavaScript code from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess a language is just a tool. So if you want to be full stack Kotlin developer, what's your motivation to get into there? I don't think Kotlin differs substantially from any other language that can be used on different platforms.
Okay, so consider it a tool. That is the final answer, right? Consider it a tool. You need it in any kind of specific purpose, then try to apply it. In the case that if you can, but if you not, then seeking for another proper tool, more proper tool.
Correct, and languages, we should not, a marriage may last forever, but a language is not like a partner in life. Languages change, technology changes, our needs evolve, and that's how it is. We should keep an eye on what Kotlin Multiplatform is offering for us now. Does it make sense? Do we include it? Those are always very personal questions. Can our team start integrating it? Do we want? Do we have resources, economical and time resources? It's always a matter of finding a compromise, and for each individual, group, or organization, there are so many variables that probably only you and your team can answer that question, and there is no general answer that will serve everybody.
Okay. I think we are moving on to some very final question here in the discussion. So, Minh Phạm, do you have a question regarding how to share the source code between multiple platforms, so iOS and Android working on the same repo? I do believe that the experience from the previous project that you have with Kotlin, KMM, and KMD is very precious here. Eric, can you have to share your experience on this, how you manage your code base?
Well, in this case, when we are developing for multiple platforms, the idea is that we will, and that's the principle on multi-platform development. We are going to have one technology that will be, or the code base is going to be common to both iOS and Android. So it makes sense to, depends on how you work. Do you have the app modularized? Do you have different repositories? That's a very particular question. I personally like to modularize up to some point. So probably if you're developing a module that is going to be used, let's say a blogging module or a deprecation module, that repository should be unified, and then each app will probably have its own independent repository that will be pulling this artifact from whatever Nexus or artifact repository you have. But yeah, code that is common goes into the same repository. Otherwise, we're losing one of the advantages, which is we only maintain one code base.
Thank you. Thank you for your sharing with your experience with that project. And moving on, we have a question from Bolan. Hello, old friend. So we have a question here that how long do you think we need to train an iOS developer in the team to be familiar with KMM and integrate with other iOS code base? Love to know your opinion on this. I would say for this question, it depends. Because like if you are having your iOS developer who is working on Swift, and I think moving from Swift to Kotlin is technically something very feasible and fast, because the thing is that we do share some common concept between the language. And interesting point that some people from Kotlin team, they do admit that they are learning and they copying some well-known and well-respected feature from Swift, especially Swift-related version. Something like null safety things into the language of Kotlin itself. So if you are moving from Swift to Kotlin, I do believe that you are finding some common point and some interesting things that like you can link to your own experience. So that would be fast for you guys to move in from Swift to learning Kotlin. And I do have a very short, what we call the cheat sheet, so that you can start it with it to have some getting started point with the Kotlin language. You can come up with the kotlinlan.org, so that you can find out the cheat sheet there. That is from the personal experience I have. And the next question that I don't know, like this is not a question, but really like a sharing from Nambar, that Shopify using KMM for heavy tasks, which is upload to native site. Interesting. I don't know it. Thank you.
There is actually one. If you Google, let me share my screen. I mean, I'm making you work a lot today, too, and let me share my screen. Yeah. So. Yeah, there is, if you Google something like Kotlin Multiplatform case studies, there is this website where they check some of the companies that are using Kotlin Multiplatform, the use case studies. So if you click here on the Netflix, they explain you a little bit the Netflix story, how do they use them, what's the architecture that they're following, etc., etc. And yeah, there are quite a few. Kasap Leroy Merlin here in Vietnam has the technological offices. They're using KMPit here. But more Quizlet, you probably know them from the app, Netflix, Yandex, Icerock, TouchLab, those guys from New York that made a lot of libraries. So yeah, it's definitely possible, and there are companies out there doing it.
Thank you for your sharing, and I think that a very good resource for anyone may have a very good starting point to learn about what is the real use case. So if you have a doubt about how can this technology can be applied in real scalable application out there that is serving multi-million user, then you can start in with reading the use case. They are perfect entry point for you to know and to decide if the technology is sustainable and is scalable enough for your adoption. So that is very important and very strong point if you want to convince people like your managers, your team member to be able to be aligned on this kind of adoption. And yes, I think that were all of the questions that we have today, and we make it very, very in time today. So again, thank you everyone for joining the live stream today. We are looking forward to seeing you in the next sections in a very soon manner, and we're looking forward to catch up with you guys offline once the scenario with the COVID pandemic is gone. Looking forward to see you guys. So guys, say goodbye to everyone.
Goodbye. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye everyone. Have a good night.
Yep.